What's different about working with generative AI is in some cases, I play more of a role in helping us figure out what the thing should do. In other a product manager will spec out like, here is the user experience. Here's the job they're trying to get done. Here's what will happen at the end of the process. In generative AI, there are cases where I am actually writing the prompts and testing this out and being like, well, what if we took the output of this prompt and we fed it into this other one? I think the team has a lot more expertise in all of the tooling and all of the ways of setting that up. But with generative AI, I can use our own tool. So I can use Airtable to kind of create tools that are a proxy for maybe what one of our tools will end up looking like.
Welcome to Season 2 of Building with AI, the show where we engage in conversations with world-class AI product builders and leaders. We help uncover tactical insights to help you build and scale better AI products. I'm your host, Haroon Choudery, and today we're joined by Chelsey Tanaka, the product lead for AI at Airtable. During the episode, Chelsey provides a glimpse into the thoughts and decisions that pushed Airtable to integrate AI into its platform. She sheds light on the challenges Airtable encountered in enterprise AI adoption, key AI initiatives, success metrics for different AI features, and much more. But before we dig in, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Autoblocks, the AI optimization platform product teams use to create world-class AI experiences. So, you just launched V0 of your AI feature or product. What's next? Autoblocks unlocks an intuitive yet powerful optimization workflow that helps you continuously understand, improve, differentiate your AI-powered products. Understand how your users interact with your product by connecting user activity to what's happening under the hood of your application. Improve your product thoughtfully and iteratively. Integrate testing of your AI products into your CI workflow and run A/B tests to see what changes are driving great user outcomes. Differentiate your AI products with powerful fine-tuning workflow that lets you turn product usage data into training data. Get started with Autoblocks for free at autoblocks.ai. Now, back to the episode. Chelsey, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So for anyone who's not familiar with Airtable AI and your work, do you mind giving an introduction of yourself and what you're working on at Airtable?
Sure. And I'll give an intro to Airtable as a platform and then what we're doing with AI. I'm Chelsey Tanaka. I'm the product lead for AI at Airtable. I've been working in enterprise SaaS companies as a product manager for about 12 years. I worked in a variety of industries, including energy, construction, a small detour in autonomous vehicles, and now I work at Airtable, which really focuses on the kind of no-code, low-code platform space. So really giving lower technical users the ability to create their own databases, interfaces, workflows, automations to solve their own problems. So that's what Airtable focuses on. Our platform is, people have referred to it in the past as a spreadsheet on steroids, but it really is a lot more than that. It's a way for non-technical users to create a database and then do all of the things you might want to do with the database. Run your own workflows off of it, create interfaces, create different views of data that different people can use. So that's Airtable in a nutshell. Specifically, what we're doing with AI is we are trying to bring all of these really amazing tools that are emerging in AI and bring them into the hands of our users. So part of that focus is on helping them use Airtable more effectively, but a big part of that focus is on helping them bring generative AI into their own workflows in order to do things like categorize their feedback or generate new marketing content or kind of all of the different use cases you can think of there.
Awesome. And just to help folks understand where Airtable stands in the market and how it differs from other database companies out there and spreadsheet companies and folks working on structured data, what was the initial use case for Airtable? I think it had something to do with cattle farmers or something along those lines is a story that I've heard. And over time, I know it's developed quite a bit. And what are some of the primary use cases that you see for Airtable today?
Yeah, I think in our history, there have been a lot of super interesting and very bespoke use cases for the tool. I think Airtable really started out being very much a B2C platform. It was a way for individuals to manage whatever inventory or assets or schedule or whatever they were managing. And so it was used by people to put all their recipes for the week and then create grocery lists, or it was used to manage a little league soccer team. So there were all of these different use cases at Airtable's inception. What we found during the evolution of the company was we started to get a lot of traction among small and medium businesses, and then eventually get traction among enterprise businesses. And the reason why Airtable was so popular in those areas was that there are all of these problems that are being solved today in big corporations that primarily use spreadsheets, email, and a bunch of other tools, maybe Slack, in order to solve them. And so if you think about a problem like a large marketing team at a big Fortune 500 company, and they need to manage all the campaigns and all the assets that go with those campaigns, they have an army of different employees and contractors and all these different people that need to be involved. Many of those processes today are being run by someone has a Google Drive folder and the employees have access to that. And then the contractors email them and documents are moving one way and another. And so I think Airtable is a really elegant solution to that. And one of the reasons it's so popular is because the people who actually are managing those workflows can also create that tooling. So they can go into their thing that looks like a spreadsheet that is actually a database, and they can say, actually, we need 3 more columns, and we need this column to have these linked records to each of our contractors, and we need this column to show the end date, and they can customize all of that on their own.
Let's maybe fast forward to the ChatGPT moment around winter 2022. And every company started thinking about generative AI and how they could leverage the technology in their products and how they can unlock more customized, magical experiences for their customers by leveraging that technology. Walk me through the conversations that were being had at Airtable at the time and how you were thinking about taking this technology and integrating it into the product.
I was pretty new to Airtable at that time. I joined in December of 2022, but our CEO and our exec team level, there was a lot of interest and a lot of curiosity and also a lot of urgency around figuring out how to apply generative AI to Airtable. I think one of the reasons specifically is with the Airtable product, we are very much appealing to companies that have a large portion of non-technical users that want to be able to do something. And we're providing them with a tool that makes that really easy. Generative AI has the potential to completely disrupt that, right? You could imagine a future where you don't need non-technical users to make a thing that looks like a spreadsheet and then build a thing that looks like a web app on top of that. You just, your non-technical users go into some platform and ask a question and they get an answer and they get a graph and they get a table. And so I think our CEO, Howie Liu, very quickly realized this is a technology that has the potential to completely disrupt the no-code, low-code space. And because of that, we need to be really thoughtful and we need to start to bring this into our product, figure out what our customers want to do with it, and figure out how we need to change as a business as a result. And then I'm happy to talk through where we went from then.
Absolutely. And so from those conversations, how did that materialize into scoping the actual implementation of that technology into the product and where exactly it would plug in?
Yeah, we started out very small. So in February of 2023, we tasked one engineer with coming up with a bunch of different proofs of concept of places where generative AI could have an impact within the Airtable platform. So he was doing those explorations for a month or two. We started to do some internal dog food of some of those ideas. And from that, we developed our first idea of the first feature that we wanted to put in customers' hands. So that feature is very much kind of a feature that leverages generative AI, but is very consistent with the current Airtable platform. So just bringing generative AI into our current platform. That feature is the ability to create a new field, and that field is an AI assist type field. And in that field, users can either use a template to walk through and have a prompt created for them, or they can write their own prompt. So within your database, you can say, okay, in this field, take information from these other fields that are part of this record, send it to a large language model, get back a response, and show that to the user. So that was the first thing that we actually brought out to a beta group of users. From there, we've really taken an approach of looking at all of the different places where AI can benefit our user group, and then really trying to have different strategies of these ones are very consistent with our current model of working and can augment what people are doing today. And these ones are more disruptive.
So it's very much like a walk before you run type of approach where you added it in a limited scope and then you made decisions as to where to plug it in and expand its scope over time. And what was the feedback from the initial implementation and from the initial AI project? And how did that inform the direction that you took with subsequent initiatives that you took that involved generative AI?
Yeah, we've gotten feedback from an alpha group in the beginning, a beta group in June, a larger beta in August, and we are actually still in our beta period. And those beta programs involved both our self-serve customers, which tend to be personal users or small to medium businesses, as well as our enterprise customers. We've definitely found specific use cases that people are super excited about. And that feedback has been helpful to help us understand how people want to use it. I would say the other area of feedback that we've really been responsive to is just understanding how many challenges there are for our large enterprise users to start using AI in any capacity. I think that was a little bit surprising to us, given all of the talk in the market of the promise of this technology and how excited people were. I think it has been a bit surprising to us, all of the hurdles that our enterprise customers have to go through. And so that's something that we have learned from and adapted to.
To learn a little bit more about those enterprise challenges. So, what are some of the challenges that came up?
In our conversations with large enterprises, we often will have the builder persona who says, this is super exciting. I'm already playing around with something like this in my personal life or in some other way. I'm using ChatGPT and Zapier and this and that to put this together. So we have those personas at an enterprise company. We then have a persona that's like a CIO, an InfoSec team, a security team, and often these companies will have an AI council they've spun up that has representatives from different teams. And often any deployment of a new tool that involves AI will have to go through that team. There are kind of a variety of concerns that those teams have. I think initially there were a lot of concerns about just what is this and how much do we understand how it works? And when companies say that they don't train their models on it, like, can we trust them? So there was just some baseline trust. I think that there are also much more sophisticated concerns. The legal department is concerned that users in the company will generate things with AI using our tool, and then they will use those things in an IP related way, or they'll use them in a media campaign, and that somehow that will have negative ramifications. So I think there's a host of concerns and a host of groups that kind of need to be brought along within the enterprise.
Have those concerns evolved over time as we've learned more about generative AI? The technologies at the foundational level have evolved.
I think the concerns really are different based on the technical background of the person you're talking to, based on where they sit in the organization, and based on that organization and what it is that they do. I think that what we do see changing more is the concern of the week changes depending on the news. So I think that fewer companies maybe were concerned about copyright implications of the models being trained on material that potentially violated copyright. That was less of a concern before the most recent set of lawsuits. Similarly, maybe last year, early on, there was some media around Samsung and some information from Samsung having been used in GPT to train the model. And so that was a big concern at the time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the space is moving so quickly and everyone seems to build and iterate on their Gen AI products and features. And there's a competitive pressure to do that as well. If other competitors are doing it, then you don't want to get caught behind. But on the other side, there are a lot of uncertainties and risks that are being unearthed and being examined. So it's a really interesting dynamic there. And how did you deal with that at Airtable? What were the approaches that you took to either mitigate or just get a better understanding or reshift your strategy based on those concerns?
I think there's a couple of very specific things that we did. The first was when Amazon Bedrock came out with their AWS hosted models, that was something we were really interested in giving our customers access to. Some of our enterprise customers feel more comfortable about AWS being a subprocessor of their data than they do of OpenAI. And so we just make it an option for them. We say, you can use Anthropic models via AWS, or you can use OpenAI models. In the future, we will continue to expand the set of models that are available. The second was we went back and renegotiated our vendor contracts. Initially, they had in the language that there would be no model training on our data, but initially there was some data being retained for abuse detection purposes. And so we went back and renegotiated those. We used the moderation endpoints from OpenAI. And so we were able to get sort of zero data retention and zero training on model data. And those two things have been satisfactory to a lot of our enterprise customers.
How's the AI team at Airtable set up?
So we are a separate pillar within the company. So we have 5 pillars within our prod dev organization. Within our pillar, we represent engineering, product design, and then we have PMMs, product marketing folks who are associated with that pillar as well. We are currently a single team, likely soon to be 2 teams. Within that team, we sort of organize into a couple of different projects. And so we probably have roughly 3 projects going in every time with sort of 2 to 3 engineers on each of those.
What are the main AI initiatives that Airtable is working on today?
We're focused on a couple of different feature areas. Some are more experimental and further out, and some are more sort of moving towards getting things ready in production. On the production side, we have a couple of features related to augmenting the capabilities of our low-code platform today. So those are the AI field, which I discussed earlier, as well as AI and automations. So within Airtable, we have an automations engine. Think of it similar to kind of like a Zapier, where you can take any of your data within Airtable, but you can also take data from Google Docs or Slack or some other place. You can put it through a workflow. So at X time, do X, Y, and Z. And so we've added AI into that as an automation action. So you can do things like when a new piece of feedback comes in, categorize that feedback according to sentiment. If that sentiment is negative, then notify these people or post that in Slack. That's the kind of workflow you can create. AI field and AI and automations are 2 of our, getting ready for our GA moment features. We also have a couple of other features, which is a comment summary feature, which similarly just kind of augments the capabilities of Airtable as they exist today. And then we're introducing our first feature that is very much about helping users use the Airtable platform, and that's our formula assistant. So within Airtable, you can write formulas. Now you can just ask the AI to write formulas for you, which is wonderful because I never actually learned Airtable's formula syntax since we've had this formula builder in dog food for quite a long time, and I never had to, which was great. So that's the work for preparing for our GA launch and getting our first set of features out to the wider market. We then are looking towards our next set of features, which I'll talk about them in the spectrum of less to more experimental. The first of those features is really focusing on this matching problem. So the matching problem, I think listeners will be familiar, is really about taking something that you have and trying to find similar things out there. And so an example of that problem is you have a piece of product feedback that comes in. You may categorize your product feedback into 500 different product gaps, right? To say this piece of feedback actually relates to what the customer wants is they want better more granular permissions on every digital object, right? And so that matching process today is really hard to do because it requires you to have a lot of domain knowledge about what the feedback is, and then a lot of domain knowledge about each of those gaps. So what we want to do is we want to use AI to do that matching. It could be product feedback to gaps. It could be marketing campaigns to prior campaigns so that you kind of see a benchmark and you can see whether your estimates are accurate. It could be a new project to a project manager. We think there's a lot of potential to create these suggestions for people within their workflows to say, hey, you could go through and ask a bunch of your coworkers this question and get like an okay project manager, but can we surface you something within the product that's really going to help you do that? So matching is one of those areas of exploration. And then our other experimental areas of exploration are around Q&A. So we're focused on allowing people to ask questions of their data and get an answer. And then the last is really starting to do processing and extraction of information within documents.
Thanks for laying that out, and sounds like a very exciting set of challenges to take on. And when you think about prioritizing these initiatives, what are the measures that you're using to prioritize?
I think in a normal product development process, we would have a lot more signal on that, right? We would say, here's what customers are asking for. Here's the ARR of those customers. Here's what our competitors are doing. I think we'd have a lot more information given that this is a new area for us. And I think often our customers don't know what to ask for. They either ask for things that are way too easy or ask for things that are way too hard. We don't have as good of a signal on that piece. We do have a signal from all our customer conversations and from our beta customers. So we're using that. On the competitive front, we are not a perfect corollary to products that we may be somewhat in competition with. And so just looking at what other people are doing is not a great way to measure that. Also, I think everyone is trying this out for the first time. I think the way that we're thinking about it is we need to get something in people's hands so that they can play around with it in a safe way and they can explore the possibilities, they can get excited about it, and they can actually start to implement some of these workflows within their organization. And so we very much focused on things that would be like easy to set up, easy to use, easy to see value, easy to understand within the context of an existing Airtable workflow. That's what we started with first. And the goal is really to get that to market. Then I think when we looked at these more experimental areas, we said, what are the big problems that our users face that AI could potentially solve? And what would that look like? And I think one of those big problems is there's so much data in an Airtable system that you have to have a really detailed knowledge of that data in order to see the linkages. And AI is a place where we could really surface that for you. And the other is that often people just don't know where to start, right? Unless you've created the space, unless you're a power builder, you may not know what to do. And so an interface that's more of a, hey, show me all of the deals that closed last week, or tell me all the projects that are off track, could be something that really helps to bring you into Airtable and engage you and give you things in the format that you really want.
I think that was great. And press release or the launch blog post for Airtable AI, there was a mention that Airtable AI works with your existing workflows. And that was a value proposition that was mentioned early on in the launch blog post. That being a consideration for how you rolled out the feature, what were some of the other considerations beyond that? For example, not to lead the witness, but was like the complexity of the project also a consideration? Because it seems like some of these different initiatives, they may vary vastly in terms of the complexity involved. For example, the Q&A project, I imagine retrieval and optimizing the RAG part is a lot more complex than comment summary, for example. But I'm curious, like what the considerations were initially and as you're prioritizing the roadmap.
Yes. As we thought about how we prioritize features, we definitely prioritized features early on that were less complex to build, so quicker to market, but also less complex to figure out the product market fit, right? Because if you're giving someone a field and they can use a short template to get a prompt or to write their own prompt, they can try that out. You can do that in a user interview. You can do that in a beta. Within a minute or two, you can see the result and you can see whether that result is good and whether that result makes sense. And we have seen by running our alpha and beta programs, we've seen real use cases where people are using this and it's being beneficial to them. I think in a project that is more complex technically, but also more complex to figure out the value to people, like a Q&A project, there's just a lot more to figure out. And I think our current hypothesis on Q&A, it is the North Star. It's what everyone wants. They want a magical robot that when you ask it a question, it gives you the right answer. But there are so many ways in which it can fail. It can fail because it can't answer the question you asked it based on the data that's in the system, right? It can fail because that data doesn't exist in the system. It exists in a different base. It doesn't exist at all. Or it could fail because that column that the AI is finding that says status is actually blank. And there's another column that's called like some super non-intuitive title is actually the column that we look to for status, right? So there are all these reasons why it can fail. And it's a terrible experience. So it's a terrible experience if you ask a question that gives you the wrong answer or an answer that's misleading. And so I think from our explorations in Q&A, we don't feel confident that we can always give you the right answer. How do we either give you an answer that helps you understand what the AI knows and how it's making its decision? Or how do we carve off milestones off of this QA journey that get you further in that direction, right? We could do natural language search to say, help me find all the records that meet this criteria. And we say, okay, we're looking at this column. We're looking for this. These are the things we found. Do you want to refine that? I think there are ways to help people understand what the AI is doing so that they have confidence when they should have confidence. And then they know they need to refine when we have low confidence.
How do you measure success for some of these AI features? Let's use automations or content summaries as examples.
For those specifically, we're really looking at how often people are using them, how many of our customers that are in the beta are using them, how often are they coming back to them over time? If there's an automation, how often is it actually triggering a real message or an action in the world? If you set up an automation and it just never triggers anything, we wouldn't necessarily call it a success. So we're really looking at it from how often are people using it? A thing we would love to know, which is very hard for us specifically as Airtable to figure out, is how often are those things generated by AI considered good and useful? And our proxy for that is if people continue to use them, then we assume that they are good and useful. But really, we would love to have a measure that's like, was this a good answer? We don't put that throughout the product because we think it would be a kind of jarring experience. So that's how we judge something like AI and automations or comment summary. For something like Q&A, we do have a sort of benchmark set of data that we are running our Q&A engine over so that we're looking to see, are we getting the right answer based on the data?
And having worked in product for many, many years, what's the difference between working on AI products versus products that are traditional code? Do you see any fundamental differences in the processes and even the relationships between developers and non-developers?
So I think there's a big difference, which is just being a product manager working on an existing product versus something that is completely new. And I think that is even more stark in this case because it's not just completely new to me, it's also very new in the world. And so I think that is an unusual place to be as a product manager. I think specific to what's different about working with generative AI, I would say one of the things that's different is in some cases, I play more of a role in helping us figure out what the thing should do. In other product, a product manager will spec out like, here is the user experience, and here's what user to be able to complete. Here's the job they're trying to get done. Here's what will happen at the end of the process. In generative AI, there are cases where I am actually writing the prompts and testing this out and being like, well, what if we took the output of this prompt and we fed it into this other one? I think the team has a lot more expertise in all of the tooling and all of the ways of setting that up. But with generative AI, I can use our own tool. So I can use Airtable to kind of create tools that are a proxy for maybe what one of our tools will end up looking like, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I think it plays to the things. One is the non-deterministic aspect of these tools. It's the best way to test how it's working is to feed in test cases yourself, right? Whether you're curating them yourself or whether you're testing the product yourself with your own test cases. Then I think the second part is the output is part of the product experience as well. That's maybe different than traditional code, where testing whether something is working or not, but there's not this subjective element of not only is it working or not, but how well is it working? And user feedback being a proxy and evaluators being a proxy for that, but oftentimes it's something that's not captured in either. And it's something that requires like a manual scan to really get an understanding of what the product experience is and if it aligns with your expectations. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of an example where one of the use cases we hypothesized for our AI tool was to start with a blurb and generate a product requirements doc. So we were like, great, it's going to generate PRDs. And we went through this whole exploration. I like changed the prompts 30 different times and I had all these different variations of prompts. And then I had all of this output. And then I came up with a rubric of if it included these 5 things, then we got a point for each one. And at the end of this whole process, then we sort of brought that to the product managers on our team and said, what do you think of this? And at the end of that whole process, we were like, yes, you could do it, but I don't think that product requirements document writing is a process that product managers want to use AI in for a variety of reasons, including that as a product manager, the PRD process is the process of writing the words by which you do all the synthesis of all of the things that are in your head and you put it together and you create this output. And starting from a draft in that specific case is not a very good workflow. So all that was an example of, is this tool good for this thing, is actually highly subjective and something I could dig in using the tool itself to kind of figure out the answer to that.
Totally. Yeah, I love that example. And what are some of the challenges and considerations that are uniquely for generative AI versus traditional?
I'll talk about one that's very specific to Airtable. When we look at competitors in the sort of productivity, like task management, low code platform space, many of the things that they are doing are one-to-one, the user wants to edit this piece of text. And so they click on that text and they edit it in some way. And so that may be 1 LLM call or 5 LLM calls. It is a small number of things per interaction by the user. Airtable at its core is a database, and we enable people to do things at scale. We took the same approach with our AI. And that means that we will let you set up an AI column on a table that has 100,000 rows, and we'll let you set it to AutoGen and just say, all right, based on all of the inputs in each of these rows, it is going to generate that answer. That was a challenge from a bunch of different standpoints. It was a challenge internally in our task queuing and making sure that those jobs got through the task queue. It was a UX challenge of showing the user where the thing is. And so having different states in those cells to say, like, this is generating, this is finished, this thing errored out. There's all these different states things could be in. That's a challenge from managing our demand for our model providers' services. So we are rate limited, especially on the higher powered models. So we need to manage our traffic in that way. So I think there were a lot of complexities in allowing people to do things at scale.
And you hinted at something there as well, where when somebody is using a different tool and they copy like a certain block of text and they ask the AI to accomplish a certain task with that limited context in mind, it seems a lot more straightforward than a database where context isn't so explicit, right? Can you walk through some of the challenges of that?
Yeah, and maybe I'll separate that out into two different things. So I think with our AI field, which is the feature I've been talking a lot about, I think that problem is not so difficult because the way that we've structured, so when you create an AI field, you essentially specify, here is the prompt that will run in each of these cells, and here are the fields that will be pulled in. So for any given record, you can pull in any of its other fields. So the user is specifying, here is the context for that specific operation. I think more generally with Airtable, for something like matching or question and answer, there is all of this richness of the data set and how the data is organized and how it is structured together that might get lost if we were to just take one piece of data and send it to an LLM. And the way we think about that in the matching case is we think about allowing users to specify which columns are being used for embeddings. So actually allowing them to say, when I match this table to this table, these are the 5 most relevant columns in this table, and these are the 5 most relevant columns in this table. So that will be part of our UX for actually creating one of those matches. In the Q&A context, we do the best we can, but we could probably also prompt users to give us more information. So we use the base description, we use the table description, we use the field descriptions, we use the field titles. We use all this information that's already in the database to kind of scaffold and help the AI understand what's happening. We will likely, in order to make that feature really successful for all kinds of folks, we'll likely have to have some kind of onboarding process where we're like, hey, you want to run Q&A on this thing? Here are 4 column titles that seem almost identical. Your AI is going to have a hard time differentiating between them. Like, why don't you rename them? Or why don't you tell us which columns you don't want to include? We're likely to have affordances like that that will help people get their data into a state where it can be more accessible.
So you mentioned this earlier as well, where you were comparing several different versions of prompts against each other. And testing is inherently an important part of building great generative AI products. It's much more iterative, I would argue, than in traditional software. How are you testing and optimizing your AI to behave as expected?
I would say we have done it in a relatively ad hoc manner in a bunch of places. So for our AI field, as we've iterated on the product, we have Airtable bases that have these columns in them, and we've looked at the results and we've copied and pasted them. So there's a lot of homegrown and ad hoc ways. We have started to formalize that more for some of our features in order to store our test data set of questions and answers. I think there are other places we could leverage that as well.
Got it. That makes sense. In your opinion, what does it take to build great GenAI products? If you had a chance to talk to all of our guests who are at the beginning of their journey to incorporating generative AI into their product or building GenAI native products, what would be your advice for building great versions of those products?
It seems unwise to position myself as an expert in the field, having worked on this very specific problem, which is like how to use GenAI that other people have built and bring it into our platform. Having worked on that for 9 months, to be like, well, my advice for everyone is to like do X, Y, and Z. I think that we are all like, I am definitely learning. I think a lot of us are learning. I think things will change so drastically over the next 5 years that we'll look back in 5 years and be like, well, that was funny that we thought it would be like that.
Yeah, so I think the message there is stay learning, which is very important in a space that's moving very quickly. And for what it's worth, in the space and incorporating generative AI API providers into your product for 9 months may make you a veteran, actually, given the nascency of this entire space. And
Yeah.
so I'm sure a lot of folks will learn a lot from this conversation.
I think if there's one thing that I feel confident about, it's like the pace of change is going to continue to be very high. And so I think that does change the calculus of all the decisions we make, right? Our teams watched OpenAI's Dev Day on a screen in a conference room, and real time as it was happening, we went like, okay, we should stop doing that thing. We should stop doing that thing. We should do more of that thing. We should test whether this thing is better than the thing that we have. I think we will see that from OpenAI and from other providers. And there will just be so many things that we can't predict. And we need to not be wed to one provider, one way of doing things, one philosophy of what part of the product we build versus what part of the product someone else has built, because all of those parameters will change.
Yeah, I think agility is the name of the game, and it's very important for companies to stay agile and avoid really pigeonholing themselves as the technology progresses, as the techniques progress.
It's also super exciting as a company that does not have an ML AI like homegrown function, right? Just the democratization of we now can all have access to these really amazing experiences for users and these really incredible technology. It feels very exciting, especially as a product manager who works in an organization that builds things who cannot actually build them myself. Right. I feel like that's a little bit of the analogy with GenAI. Like Airtable would have to invest such a huge amount of money to be able to give all of our customers the ability to translate anything in their base. But now we just have it, right? We can give that capability to our customers, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's almost like the last mile user experience, isn't it? Where you're adding this reasoning engine into your product that's able to just give your users more of what they want more quickly in a more personalized way.
Like, I am so excited about it. And I try to communicate that to all the customers I talk to. And it's very funny because I mentioned before, they either want something that's like super easy and you're like, we could definitely automatically do that. Or they want something that's just like so unreasonably hard. And so it's like telling a customer, like, hey, you could take all of your product feedback from all over the world and just have it all translated into English and then categorized and go to the right team. And now they can read it because it's all there, right? That's hugely helpful. And then they'll turn around and they'll be like, great. Now what I want it to do is I want it to look at all of my projects and tell me like, which ones should I do and which ones shouldn't I do? And you're like, it's not a magical robot that can tell you what the best strategy for your business is. If you had in your system to be able to measure the impact of X project versus Y project, then you could conceivably create a system that could do that. But just having all these projects, the AI is not going to tell you like what you should do. And so those are examples of such powerful technology, and also is hard for people to understand what's possible and what's not.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you there. How do you think about competitive differentiation when you think about Gen AI products or features? You mentioned early on that you're thinking about it in a way that's omitting what competitors are doing because the considerations for Airtable may not be exactly the same as the considerations for folks that you might be pitted against in the market. But are there some general things that you keep in mind when you think about what it takes for Airtable AI to be successful in the market compared to others that may copy some of the approaches and features that you're building?
It's a good question. I think more about how does AI make Airtable more competitive against the solutions that we currently compete with? Not like how does our feature set sort of line up against people in our space or that are trying to do the things that we are. And the reason I differentiate that is Airtable does have this position as adopted solution for large enterprises. And so as such, we are competing a specific set of implementations. And often those implementations are like Salesforce or a ServiceNow, some kind of a custom database and workflow platform. So I do think about those capabilities and how they match up.
I think what I'm getting from that, it's not necessarily about how well you're competing specifically in the context of Gen AI and what's different there, but really how are you leveraging Gen AI to build products that are adding value to your users in a way that makes you competitively advantageous.
That's totally right. And at Airtable, we can add GenAI that helps people do things better. And we can also add other features that helps people do things better. And sometimes AI is the way to go, and sometimes it's something else. So like as an example of that, we have this vision of you could come into Airtable and describe in words what you're trying to do, and we would create your base structure, and we would create your workflows, and we would create your interfaces, and we would sort of like create that all for you right now. That's a really cool and I think very powerful thing we could do with GenAI. But we've already taken the first steps to that, not with GenAI. We've released this kind of fast app setup workflow where you come in and you say, okay, I'm trying to do a project management workflow. I want it to have tasks and this and this. And so there are features that are AI powered features and features that are non AI powered features. And together with the set of those, we need to create something that is really going to work for users.
And that's similar to the advice I've gotten most frequently on these interviews. And I would say the most common advice and perspective I've seen in regards to what it takes to build successful GenAI products is really the same as what it takes to build a successful product, period, right? It's not necessarily GenAI or otherwise. It's the fundamental principles of product management and development still hold. And so that aligns with that. And looking ahead, I'm curious to learn more about the vision for the future and future of low code, no code databases like Airtable. How does AI evolve at Airtable? Any predictions as to how the space evolves? Curious to learn about your thoughts on the future of the space.
Yeah, I'll start smaller and go out. So I think at Airtable, there are 3 areas that I'm really excited about. One, which I think we've only started to scratch the surface, is using AI to help people use Airtable better. So that is things like Formula Assistant. You could imagine an AI assistant that helps you write an automation or set up a base and set up your whole workflow. A lot of our customer feedback is around, I am a power builder and I create these tools for people to use, but they come into the tool and they don't know what to do. So how do they figure out, for me, this specific person who needs to be part of this marketing workflow, like, what am I supposed to do? What happens when I approve an asset? Where does it go? And so really just help people understand the Airtable ecosystem and what they're supposed to do. The second is really doubling down on end user facing features. So in Airtable, a lot of what we build are tools that builders use to set up these workflows for the people on their teams. And they're relatively locked down. So a digital marketing coordinator at a big firm, they will create a tool for the people on their team to use. But those people can only view this data and click on this record and click reviewed and comment. They purposely make it pretty streamlined and pretty locked down for the people on their team. I think there's a cool opportunity to use GenAI to let those end users do more with Airtable. So things like they can highlight a piece of text and they can say, oh, I actually want to update this, or they can generate something new to put into the system. So how do you give users the power to use those tools in a way that's not disruptive to their workflows? And then I think the third area is really just sort of pushing the boundaries of what all of these new capabilities are. So we haven't started using vision capabilities yet. I think are just scratching the surface of using embeddings and trying to match and link different parts of our data structure together. That's a huge possibility. I think Q&A is a really big area for us, which probably ends up looking like a whole bunch of different features. Those were the things within kind of the constraints of Airtable today that I'm super excited about. I think the sky's the limit in terms of the vision for the future. Airtable's mission is to democratize software creation for a whole host of use cases. And so if you think about applying generative AI to that, how do you use AI to give people the ability to create the software that they want? That's a really big space. And I think there's a ton of opportunity there. We've just scratched the surface, really trying to think about how can AI supercharge what we built today? And then I think there's a whole other places we could go with that in the future.
Well, Chelsey, thanks so much for taking the time. Really enjoyed having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.